Come on in, hit that like button, subscribe. Welcome to Focus Daily TV. Today we'll be delving into when the banking corporate organization took over the media with the Sedition Act of 1798. Shortly after the bankers began to attempt to introduce this fiat form of currency in the late early 1800s, people began to speak out against it. And today we're going to see what happened to those who spoke out against these bankers in their attempt to guide us straight to hell with their banking, bondman and bondwomen acts. Get these words right. Let's go, y'all.
Hi, this is Jack Stanley, and I wanted to talk about a newspaper that was very prevalent in the early part of the history of this country. In fact, it was the first in the order of what you might call the opposition press. It was called the American Aurora, or General Advertiser, founded by Benjamin Franklin Bach, or Bake, whichever way you like to pronounce it. There were several different ways.
You know, these names that they speak of, that's just another form of code that they speak in, attributing all the acts of the past to foreign intervention rather than the will of God. God was trying to make it be known that this banking and these money changers were not the way for the people to go. Here on Focus Daily TV, we speak about biblical prophecy, specifically the coming of the Lord, and how those known as Afro-Americans or African-Americans are indeed the rightful owners of this land. This land called America is our birthright as the children of God.
Of saying it. And William Duane, and the newspaper was started.
Let's start it over.
Hi, this is Jack Stanley, and I wanted to talk about a newspaper that was very prevalent in the early part of the history of this country. In fact, it was the first in the order.
The moment the media was taken over by the money changers.
Of what you might call the opposition press. It was called the American Aurora, or General Advertiser, founded by Benjamin Franklin Bach, or Bake, whichever way you like to pronounce it. There were several different ways of saying it. And William Duane, and the newspaper was started in 1794. Now, let me explain who Benjamin Franklin Bach was. He was Benjamin Franklin's grandson. And the thing is that Benjamin Franklin, of course, was a printer, and his grandson had a great deal of interest in printing. Also,
his so-called grandson rebelled against their secret council, rebelled against their confederacy by releasing the facts of how the banking organizations were secretly conspiring to take over the so-called American government.
Went with his grandfather on trips to Europe, as a matter of fact. So he was a very well-versed individual and knew a lot about France. And of course,
so what does this have to do with subversion? The media began to subvert people, ideologically subvert people into a sleeping dead state in order to conceal their true agenda.
Of course, in the 1790s, when the newspaper started, there was a lot of activity taking place in France, and there was a lot of activity here in the United States concerning the revolution taking place in France. And of course, we took a neutral posture. That was the...
Of course, it was a banking revolution. People began to rise up against the subversion of these banking money-changing institutes.
Decision of the Washington administration. Now, The American Aurora states concerning the revolution taking place in France. And of course, we took a neutral posture. That was the decision of the Washington administration. Now, the American Aurora was a very partisan paper. It was a Republican paper, basically, for all intents and purposes. Pro-France, all that stuff like that. And it was very anti-federalist. So it was not at all...
Come on, guy, let's get to it. Let's get to the information.
...fond of George Washington, and they hated John Adams. Now, the thing is that they wrote frightening and horrible things, and not always very true things about John Adams or George Washington, or maybe even Alexander Hamilton and anybody else who was a Federalist. It got so that in 1798, John Adams instituted the Alien and Sedition Acts, which meant that you could not write or present things that were...
So it basically meant you cannot speak against the banking institutes. No matter what type of information you may think you have, it is strictly forbidding to speak against the money changers. If this was 1790, they'd be beating down my door right now because I'm condemning the money changers.
Were
in the name of Christ, in the name of the Lord.
Against the government or against the current presidency. And of course, the American Aurora did. And its editors were jailed. And Benjamin Franklin Bach died in jail during a yellow fever epidemic. Now, I want to give you an example of the American Aurora. This is an example from, what's the date here? December 13th, 1805. Now, this is a few years after Benjamin Franklin Bach's death, but if you look at the header, it'll mention William Duane and then the successor to Benjamin Franklin Bach, and printed in Franklin Court. Now, the interesting thing about this is a fascinating newspaper. Very hard to find today, copies of it. But
yeah, while you're here, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe, support the channel, hashtag Focus Daily TV, support the bringing of this truth, and doing my part to prepare people, those who are worthy, for the coming of the Lord.
What's really...
all of this information must be revealed ahead of his coming so people can have an opportunity to make a good choice, an informed decision on whether to follow the Lord or go down in nothingness. First, we must know the truth of what occurred in this land that they currently call America, which is actually Israel, or Jerusalem, the Holy Land which the Bible speaks of. That's what they're trying to hide from people. And the last thing that these bankers want folks to know is the truth about how this system operates. Once again, hence the Sedition Act of 1798.
Really important about it is the fact that that was the first of the opposition press. I mean, serious opposition press. And of course, its editor died in prison. Fascinating book was written about it many years ago in the late 20th century, called The American Aurora. And as you can see here, it says some of the various things that were stated.
So, yeah, the American Aurora gained his reputation by speaking against the banking institute. But as this guy just explained, he suffered a severe penalty of death and imprisonment and death for doing such. And henceforth, the media belonged to the banking institutions. Hopefully you was able to catch on to that. Hopefully you had your discernment cap on. But until next time, hit that like button, subscribe, Support the channel, hashtag Focus Daily TV, and yeah, we out of here.